The public image of a celebrity is often a carefully constructed facade, designed to project strength, success, and unwavering control. For years, Steve Harvey embodied this archetype, standing as a pillar of confidence in the entertainment industry. However, behind the bright lights of the stage and the polished television persona, a profoundly different narrative was unfolding. The reality of his personal life was far more fragmented than the audience ever perceived, marked by a series of high-stakes transitions that tested his character at every turn. When the public finally caught a glimpse of the chaos beneath the surface, it wasn't merely the dissolution of a marriage that caught them off guard. It was the sudden, radical shift that occurred in the immediate aftermath of his divorce. This wasn't just a breakup. It was a systemic collapse of his personal and financial world that forced a complete, rapid, and at times desperate evolution of his life's trajectory. The foundation of Harvey's story is rooted in the early, often overlooked years of his career, long before the national recognition and the global brand. His initial marriage to Marcia Harvey in 1980 represented a different era, a time defined by struggle, uncertainty, and the relentless pursuit of a dream that was still far on the horizon. This period saw the birth of his first children, Brandy, Carly, and Broderick, establishing a family dynamic that was largely shielded from the scrutiny that would eventually follow. On the surface, it appeared to be a conventional start, but the pressures of an unstable entertainment career created a tension that was impossible to sustain. The financial anxieties and the constant need to be away from home to chase gigs fundamentally altered the intimacy of their union. As his career trajectory shifted, the marriage naturally began to fray, eventually culminating in a divorce that closed the first major chapter of his adult life. However, the narrative of his first marriage is historically significant not just for its conclusion, but for the overlapping timelines that would later become a focal point for those analyzing his life. By his own account, Harvey's path had already crossed with Marjorie Bridges years before the end of his first marriage, sparking a connection that would remain dormant but persistent in the back of his mind. Instead of pursuing that immediate spark, he moved forward into a second marriage with Mary Shackelford in 1996. This specific union, which produced his son Wynton, would eventually become the most contentious and widely scrutinized period of his entire life. The transition into this marriage was marked by the rapid ascent of his professional career, particularly through the massive success of the Kings of Comedy, which provided him with unprecedented wealth but also introduced complex new pressures into his household. The discord in his second marriage, according to later testimonies, began surfacing far earlier than most observers realized. For nearly a decade, the public saw a triumphant comedian, while privately the household was allegedly experiencing deep-seated issues that led to a total breakdown of trust. It is fascinating to analyze how such vastly different realities can exist side by side, where one's public performance reaches peak success, while the domestic situation deteriorates rapidly. The contrast highlights a classic human struggle, the difficulty of maintaining genuine connection while living under the intense, distorting glare of fame. By the early 2000s, this tension had created a breaking point, setting the stage for one of the most high-profile and painful divorce proceedings in the industry, which would eventually leave both parties feeling emotionally and legally exhausted. When the marriage to Mary Shackelford officially dissolved, the fallout was neither clean nor quiet. It was a prolonged, messy, and deeply emotional conflict that left lasting scars on all involved. From a human perspective, it is critical to recognize the depth of the pain described by those affected by such high-profile splits. Mary's subsequent claims that she lost her sense of identity, her financial security, and a meaningful connection with her son provide a somber reminder of the human cost that often hides behind legal settlements and court documents. These assertions, whether fully accepted by the public or not, paint a picture of a life completely unmoored by a traumatic dissolution. It serves as a study in how the end of a relationship can redefine a person's existence, stripping away the social standing and security they had come to rely upon for nearly a decade. One of the most heart-wrenching components of this period was the legal battle surrounding the custody of his son, Wynton. This is a point of deep contention that serves as a case study in how legal systems can exacerbate personal tragedies. The reality of being pushed out of a child's daily life, as Mary described, is a profound trauma that complicates the narrative of a simple celebrity divorce. It forces the audience to look beyond the headlines and consider the psychological toll such battles take on the parents and the child. Harvey's eventual attainment of custody was a pivotal victory for his personal life, but it was a moment that simultaneously deepened the resentment and the public divide between the two parties. This was the moment where the personal stakes reached their highest, moving from financial disputes to the core of their individual identities as parents. Financially, the aftermath of this divorce was equally catastrophic, challenging the idea that fame and success offer a permanent buffer against ruin. Harvey's admission that he was left with merely $1,700, a sharp decline from the tens of millions he had earned, is a sobering reality check. It highlights the vulnerability of high earners who do not personally manage the complexities of their own financial, tax, and legal obligations. Discovering that 7 years of back taxes were owed, combined with the loss of income from stagnant projects, created a perfect storm. It was a moment of absolute vulnerability, a total reset that forced him to confront the consequences of previous negligence. In documentary analysis, this is the low point of the hero's journey, the moment where everything that was once known is stripped away, leaving only the raw core of the person. The timing of this financial collapse, coinciding with the legal and emotional devastation of the divorce, makes his subsequent recovery even more notable. It is rare for someone to experience a total professional, financial, and personal demolition at the exact same moment. However, it was precisely this convergence of crises that acted as a catalyst for his later reinvention. When he was at his lowest, he was forced to re-examine his priorities, his choices, and his future. This period of his life is not just a story of misfortune. It is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit when faced with the absolute loss of one's identity and security. He was essentially forced to choose between total defeat and an aggressive, perhaps even risky, pursuit of a new direction that few would have dared to take in his circumstances. It is here that the narrative takes a surprising turn, illustrating how personal desperation can often lead to the most definitive life decisions. Only hours after the finalization of his divorce, in a state of professional uncertainty and financial ruin, Harvey reached out to Marjorie Bridges. This was not a move driven by careful planning. It was an impulsive, almost instinctual reach towards someone who represented a missed opportunity from his past. The fact that he was in a casino, potentially seeking a distraction from the crushing weight of his reality, adds a layer of irony to the situation. It underscores the erratic nature of the decisions people make when they have nothing left to lose. He was not looking for a traditional path to stability. He was looking for a connection that he had previously ignored, a gamble on a person rather than his circumstances. The conversation that followed, described as immediate and familiar, bridges the 2 decades that had passed since their first meeting. For a listener, this highlights the idea that some connections possess a unique, enduring quality that can withstand long periods of silence. When Harvey realized Marjorie was available, his decision to fly to Memphis the next day was a leap of faith. He was, by his own admission, at rock bottom. His career was fading, his wealth was gone, and he was fighting through the wreckage of his second marriage. Yet he prioritized this reconnection over everything else. It was an act of profound urgency, signaling that he had reached a point where he realized his professional accomplishments meant nothing without the right partnership. This was his attempt to secure the second chance he clearly felt he had missed years prior. Marjorie's reaction to this, however, introduces a crucial human element to the story: the establishment of healthy boundaries. She did not blindly accept his overture despite the history. Her insistence that she did not date married men, even when told the marriage had ended just a day prior, shows a level of integrity and caution that likely stabilized the entire relationship. She did not rush. The month-long period of verification she required serves as a vital lesson in trust building. It shows that even when someone is desperate for a second chance, the partner has the power to set the terms of engagement. This dynamic provided the structural integrity that Harvey's previous relationships had clearly lacked, and it forced him to slow down and prove his intentions in a way he had never done before. When they finally met, the decisiveness of the encounter suggests that Harvey had reached a moment of clarity. Seeing her again, he was confronted with the realization that he had let her go once, and he was not prepared to let that happen again. This isn't just a romantic narrative. It is an analytical look at the psychology of regret and the power of a second chance. It explains why he was so willing to commit, even while his life was in a state of total upheaval. He was seeking a foundation that he hadn't known how to build previously. For the audience, this provides a window into the motivation behind his later, more stable image, the realization that his personal happiness was an essential prerequisite to his professional sustainability. The context of this meeting cannot be overstated. He was not a success story at that moment. He was a man in the middle of a disaster. The fact that Marjorie chose to stay and build with him during that specific time is the crux of the narrative. It wasn't about the money or the fame, it was about the foundation they built when he had nothing to offer but his own uncertainty. This narrative arc, from the height of success to the depths of failure and the subsequent, slow rebuild, is a classic structural element of a compelling documentary. It grounds the celebrity in the relatable human struggle of trying to pick up the pieces when your life has effectively ended. It is also important to address the resurgence of the past. Even as he began his new life with Marjorie, the shadow of his second marriage refused to disappear. The lawsuit filed by Mary years later demanding millions and making explosive claims was a significant reminder that one cannot simply outrun their history. This serves as a cautionary point in the documentary analysis, that the consequences of a messy divorce can ripple out for years, resurfacing at the most inconvenient times. The legal claims of soul murder and extreme psychological distress, while dismissed by the courts, highlight the intensity of the trauma that she was dealing with. It creates a necessary tension in the documentary, showing that Harvey's life was not just a steady climb, but a constant negotiation with the ghosts of his past. The legal battles, despite their dismissal, were public-facing and damaging. When Mary took to the internet to tell her story, she wasn't just seeking legal redress, she was seeking validation. This is a common phenomenon in high-conflict divorces, where the public platform becomes the final battlefield for those who feel the legal system failed them. Harvey's legal team's response, that the claims were baseless and should be handled in the original jurisdiction, is the standard professional counterresponse. However, the emotional damage was already done. The public was forced to weigh the two competing narratives, neither of which could ever be fully settled. It shows how the internet has changed the nature of private disputes, turning deeply personal issues into public performances that never truly reach an end. Furthermore, Harvey's own admissions in later years about the fundamental issues in his second marriage add depth to his character. Admitting that he entered that marriage for the wrong reasons is a significant moment of self-reflection. It shows a departure from the public persona of the early 2000s and a move toward a more grounded, honest acknowledgement of his own flaws. In documentary storytelling, this kind of introspection is essential for audience engagement. It moves the subject away from being a static, untouchable celebrity and toward being a relatable individual who is capable of making mistakes and learning from them. It creates a bridge of empathy between the star and the viewer. As the narrative shifts toward his recovery, it's necessary to examine the complexity of blending families. The 7 children involved in his new life with Marjorie represent a massive, complex dynamic that was far from easy to manage. When he speaks of the resistance he faced, including a child telling him he was not their father, it strips away the polish of his later success. It highlights that the family man image wasn't given to him. It was earned through years of patience, consistency, and the difficult work of integrating different, often traumatized family backgrounds. This was the foundation for his comeback, not just the financial one but the emotional one. Rumors and speculation, of course, were the constant backdrop to this growth. The allegations of infidelity, the scrutiny of family vacations, and the persistent questioning of his character never fully left him. It is a testament to the resilience of his partnership with Marjorie that they managed to navigate these pressures without allowing them to derail their family. The media's role in this, which thrives on digging up old wounds for the sake of clicks, acts as the antagonist in this documentary. It challenges the viewer to decide if the growth shown by the subject is genuine or merely another layer of performance. The success of his later career, shows like Family Feud and his various business partnerships, is the tangible evidence of his comeback. It's the final act of the story where the hard work of his middle years manifests as professional dominance. However, the documentary analysis argues that this success would not have been possible without the radical life changes he made immediately following his divorce. The contrast between the $1,700 man and the global icon he became is the primary hook. It illustrates that success is often born from the ashes of total failure, provided one is willing to make the hard, often unpopular decisions to reset their life. Ultimately, Steve Harvey's story is a compelling case study on the nature of recovery and the importance of personal alignment. The speed at which he moved after his divorce, while risky, was perhaps the only way he knew how to pivot away from a future that had already failed him. Whether one views his actions as strategic, impulsive, or a mixture of both, the results are undeniable. He managed to craft a third act that defined his legacy, even while the remnants of his past continued to echo in the background. It is a story of survival, a story of calculated risk, and a story about the complex, often painful, path to becoming who you are meant to be. When analyzing the professional and personal architecture of Steve Harvey's resurgence, one must look closely at the components that allowed him to move from a state of near bankruptcy to global prominence. The pivot point, as established, was the divorce. Yet, it wasn't just the change in relationship that mattered, it was the psychological shift that accompanied it. When you have lost your financial safety net, your reputation is under attack, and your personal life is in tatters, you are left with two choices: succumb to the pressure or build an entirely new framework for your existence. Harvey chose the latter, but the process was agonizingly slow and fraught with constant public reminders of the life he was trying to leave behind. This stage of the analysis focuses on the methodology of his recovery, and how he managed to maintain focus amidst the noise. One of the most interesting aspects of his journey is how he transitioned from the raw, edgy comedian of the 1990s to the polished, advice-giving host of the 2010s. This was not a random evolution, it was a necessary professional pivot. The Kings of Comedy brand, while lucrative, was tied to a version of himself that no longer aligned with the stable family man image he was cultivating with Marjorie. By shifting his brand toward television hosting and eventually relationship advice, he was effectively rebranding his own life lessons. He turned his personal mistakes into a platform for success. This is a common tactic among successful figures, packaging one's own trauma and wisdom into a product that others find valuable. It turned his life experience into his greatest asset. The financial recovery was equally tactical. After the revelation of the tax issues and the divorce settlement, Harvey was forced to become hyper-aware of his business dealings. He shifted from being a talent who signed checks without understanding the underlying obligations to a businessman who took an active, often controlling interest in his ventures. This transition from creative to executive is crucial for any long-term comeback. It illustrates the maturity that is often forced upon people after they have experienced a total, catastrophic loss. He stopped relying on others to manage his future and began building a corporate structure around his talent that could withstand the volatility of the entertainment industry. Marjorie's role in this professional architecture cannot be understated. She wasn't just a partner, she was a stabilizing force that allowed him to focus on the high-stakes work of rebuilding. In many high-profile couples, the partner's influence is often hidden, but in Harvey's case, he has consistently credited her for his ability to stay the course. This speaks to the necessity of a supportive, grounded partner when one is undergoing a major life transformation. She helped him create an environment where he could actually think, plan, and execute, rather than just reacting to the crises of the previous marriage. This partnership was the bedrock upon which his new professional persona was built. The blended family dynamic also played a massive part in his growth. By bringing together children from different relationships, Harvey was forced to develop a level of empathy and emotional intelligence that he arguably lacked during his previous marriages. Dealing with resistance from children who had seen his previous relationship failures taught him the value of consistency and humility. He couldn't just show up as the famous father. He had to prove his dedication through small day-to-day actions. This growth as a parent was reflected in his public persona, making him seem more relatable, more grounded, and more human to his audience. It was a crucial part of his appeal in later years. The public, however, remained skeptical. This is where the documentary analysis gets interesting. Even as he was becoming more refined and family-oriented, there was always a contingent of the public waiting for the facade to crack. The resurfacing of his ex-wife's claims in later years, as mentioned before, served as a perpetual drag on his brand. Every time a new allegation appeared, the media would contrast it with his current, polished life. This creates a fascinating tension for the viewer, the struggle between the person he was and the person he is trying to be. It shows that in the digital age, a celebrity's past is never truly in the past. Yet Harvey's reaction to these stressors was consistent. He rarely engaged. He learned to let his team handle the legalities while he maintained the focus on his work. This is a vital skill for anyone trying to maintain a public career through controversy, the ability to compartmentalize. While he was being sued for $60 million and accused of terrible things, he continued to show up for work, continued to mentor others, and continued to project the image of a man in control. Whether this is true maturity or simply a professional defense mechanism is up for debate, but it was undoubtedly an effective strategy for career preservation. The role of technology in his resurgence also cannot be ignored. The rise of social media during his comeback years gave him a direct line to his audience, allowing him to bypass the traditional media filters that might have been more interested in the gossip than his actual work. He could share his own stories, his own advice, and his own truth directly with the people who were following him. This helped him curate his image in a way that was impossible during the earlier years of his career. He essentially became his own PR machine, which is a foundational element of modern celebrity success. One might argue that his advice persona, which became a staple of his later career, was a direct reflection of his own need to make sense of his life. By giving advice to others about relationships, marriage, and success, he was reinforcing those values in himself. It was a way of institutionalizing his own lessons learned. It's an effective way to keep oneself accountable. When you become a public teacher of certain values, you are forced to live by them, at least on the surface. This is a brilliant, if perhaps subconscious, strategy for personal growth. The financial recovery was not just about earning more money. It was about shifting the mindset from earning to building wealth. His ventures into real estate, clothing, and other industries showed a diversification that was lacking during his peak comedy years. He learned that the entertainment industry is fickle, and that relying on a single income stream is a recipe for disaster. This diversification was a direct response to the vulnerability he felt during his divorce. It was a strategic move to ensure that he would never again be in a position where he could be left with just $1,700. The documentary of his life is also a story about the fragility of male ego. He had to shed the version of himself that needed constant validation from his career, and replace it with a version that could find value in his family and his personal connections. This is a difficult transition for any man, but especially for one whose identity was so closely tied to his status as a king of comedy. The humility required to make that shift is profound. It required him to admit he was wrong, to apologize, and to change. His relationship with his children during this period is also quite revealing. He had to earn the respect of his stepchildren, and in some cases the children from his own previous marriages who had grown up watching his struggles. This was not a father-knows-best scenario. It was a complicated negotiation of respect and love. The fact that he was open about these struggles, about the resistance he faced, shows that he had moved past the need to look like a perfect, infallible father. This vulnerability, while calculated, is what made him truly likable to his wider audience. We must also analyze the impact of his work on Family Feud. It might seem like a simple game show, but it was the perfect vehicle for his specific brand of wit and warmth. It allowed him to be the relatable, slightly mischievous but ultimately guiding figure for everyday families. It was the antithesis of the dark, stressful, and highly public divorce drama. It allowed the audience to see him in a normalized setting, which was a brilliant way to rehabilitate his image. It was a soft landing for a brand that had been severely damaged. His business investments during this time also speak to a desire for longevity. By associating himself with reputable brands and sustainable businesses, he was moving away from the ephemeral nature of celebrity. He wanted to be a fixture, not a fad. This is the hallmark of a survivor in the entertainment industry. He looked at the wreckage of his mid-career crisis and decided that he wanted to build something that would last well past his ability to host a game show. There's also the question of his religious or spiritual evolution. He often speaks about faith and the role it played in his recovery. While this is common among celebrities in the US, in his case, it seems tied to his need for a higher power to make sense of the chaos he had experienced. It provides a moral framework for his advice and his life decisions. Whether one is religious or not, the impact of this framework on his consistency and his stability is clear. It gave him a reason to show up and perform even when he wanted to give up. His ability to stay on brand, even during the most tumultuous times of his life, is perhaps his most impressive professional attribute. No matter what was happening in his private life, he understood that he was a product. He understood that his value was tied to his ability to perform. This again can be seen as either a sign of deep dedication or a form of emotional detachment, but it is undoubtedly why he is still relevant today. He treated his life like a corporation, and he was the CEO. When we consider the risks he took, such as the reconnection with Marjorie, we have to realize that they were calculated risks. He wasn't just gambling, he was choosing a path that he believed would lead to a more stable future. He was tired of the volatility, tired of the conflict, and tired of the unpredictability. He chose stability, even if the road to get there was paved with uncertainty and potential for further disaster. That is a hallmark of a person who is ready to change. The media's portrayal of him has also evolved. He went from being the king of comedy to the man who found himself. This narrative shift is exactly what a successful comeback requires. He was no longer just the guy who made people laugh. He was the guy who had seen it all and come out the other side. That is a much more powerful and enduring brand. It allows him to transition into older age and a different phase of his career with dignity and purpose. The endurance of his partnership with Marjorie is the ultimate proof of his growth. Through all the rumors, the legal threats, and the immense pressure of their lives, they have stayed together. This suggests that the foundation they built was real. It suggests that they were able to move past the initial desperate circumstances and create something that could actually sustain them. This is the central, positive takeaway from his otherwise chaotic personal history. Finally, we have to acknowledge that his story is far from over. There will always be new challenges, new rumors, and new legal threats, but he has established a track record of survival that is hard to argue with. He has proven that he can handle the absolute collapse of his life and still come back stronger. That is the essence of a successful comeback story, not the absence of struggle but the persistence through it. It is a compelling human story that continues to evolve. The legacy of Steve Harvey is a complex tapestry woven with threads of incredible professional success, profound personal failure, and a persistent, almost relentless drive for reinvention. When we look back at the trajectory of his life, we aren't just seeing a celebrity career. We are seeing a study in the modern condition of fame. We see how the public demands perfection from their stars, how they punish them for their failures, and how they demand a specific, palatable narrative of redemption. Harvey has had to navigate all of these, often while his personal life was essentially in ruins. This final section analyzes what his story means for the wider culture of celebrity and how his life serves as a blueprint for the modern, multi-hyphenate icon. The first part of his legacy is the democratization of the comeback. He showed that even at the age when many entertainers are beginning to fade, one can reinvent themselves completely. He took the skills he learned as a comedian and applied them to the roles of host, author, businessman, and life mentor. This is a crucial lesson for anyone in a creative field. Your skills are transferable and your brand can be pivoted. He proved that the end of one career chapter is not the end of the career itself. This is an optimistic, and perhaps necessary, message in an industry that is notoriously ageist and fickle. However, the legacy is also marked by the shadow of his personal history. The fact that he is still asked about his divorces, his children, and the allegations against him shows that the price of fame is a loss of privacy that never truly ends. Even when he is at his most successful, he is tethered to the man he was 20 years ago. This is a sobering look at what we, as a society, demand from our public figures. We want them to be perfect, and when they aren't, we want them to confess, to atone, and to be fixed. Harvey has had to play this role, and it has undeniably shaped his life. His relationship with Marjorie stands as the centerpiece of his personal legacy. It represents the idea that love and partnership can be the antidote to the toxicity of fame. In a world where celebrity marriages are notoriously short-lived and marked by scandal, their endurance is, to many, a point of fascination. It serves as an idealized, if perhaps unreachable, goal for many of his fans. It reinforces the idea that no matter how far you have fallen, it is possible to find someone who will build with you. This is a powerful, enduring narrative that sells books, draws audiences, and builds brands. Business side of his legacy is equally significant. By moving into fashion, technology, and broadcasting, he has ensured his relevance for decades to come. He has built, as he might say, empire. This move toward being a business mogul is common for modern celebrities, but he was one of the first to do it with such intent. He recognized that being a comedian was not enough. He understood the economics of fame and made sure he was not just the product, but the owner of the products. This is a blueprint for the future of celebrity. But we must return to the humanity of the story. The resistance he faced from his family, the pain of the custody battles, the public ugly disputes, these are not just footnotes, they are the core of who he is. They are the experiences that made his advice ring true to so many people. If he were a perfect man with a perfect life, his advice would be hollow. Because he has been broken, because he has made terrible mistakes, and because he has fought through the wreckage, his words have weight. That is the paradox of his success. He is valued for the mistakes he survived. His influence on the next generation of entertainers is also clear. You can see his impact in the way many younger comedians and hosts are now branding themselves. They are not just entertainers, they are brands. They are not just performers, they are mentors. He paved the way for this multifaceted celebrity model. He showed that you don't have to choose between being an entertainer and a businessman. You can be both, and in doing so, you can create a level of stability that was previously impossible. The way he handles his public image is another significant part of his legacy. He has learned to be proactive, to tell his own story before others can tell it for him. Even when he is the subject of intense, negative scrutiny, he stays the course. He doesn't let the public narrative drive his daily behavior. This level of discipline is essential for anyone who wants to survive in the public eye. He has mastered the art of not taking the bait, a skill that is increasingly rare in the age of viral scandals and instant backlash. What about the risks we discussed earlier? Looking back, they were the most important decisions of his life. He risked everything on a second chance with a woman from his past, he risked everything on a new career path, and he risked everything on a new approach to his own life. This willingness to take risks is what distinguishes him from so many others who might have simply faded away after such a public collapse. It was a gamble that paid off, but it was a gamble that required a level of courage that should be acknowledged. The role of his faith in his legacy is also something that his fans deeply connect with. It provides a sense of continuity in his life, a constant anchor in a world that is always changing. It allows him to present himself as a man who has learned the hard way that there is something bigger than his own ego. Whether or not this is a genuine transformation or a strategic pivot is almost beside the point. It is a vital part of the story that his audience expects him to tell. His relationship with the media is also an interesting facet of his legacy. He has had a love-hate relationship with it, often using it to his advantage while simultaneously being its victim. He understands the mechanics of fame better than most, and he has learned to manipulate them to his benefit. This is a, if you will, smart approach to the modern media landscape. He doesn't fight it, he feeds it what it wants while keeping the core of his life secure. His legacy also involves the way he talks about men and masculinity. He has become a voice for many men who are trying to navigate the complexities of modern relationships. Whether you agree with his advice or not, he has carved out a space for himself as an authority on these issues. This is a significant part of his brand, and one that has allowed him to reach an audience that few other comedians can claim. He has become in a way, father figure for many, which is a powerful position to hold in the culture. The documentary of his life is not a simple story of success. It is a complicated story of human struggle, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of self-improvement. It is a story that refuses to be simplified into a soundbite. Every time we think we have him figured out, a new layer of the story reveals itself, a new struggle, a new success, a new complication. That is the sign of a truly compelling, living, evolving story. When we consider his long-term impact, we have to look at how he has shaped the landscape of modern entertainment. He changed what it meant to be a celebrity host. He changed what it meant to be a brand. He changed the way we talk about personal success. He did all this while living through a life that would have destroyed most other people. That is his true, lasting contribution. In the end, his story is about the resilience of the human identity. He was stripped of everything: his wealth, his reputation, his family life, and he had to build it all back from the ground up. He is a testament to the fact that you can change your trajectory, even when the odds are stacked against you. That is a universal, deeply human story that will resonate for years to come. The question of whether his move was smart or too risky is the one we started with, and it is the one that still matters.